Good morning. This week on Face the State, the explosive growth meets the slow decline. It's the competing stories of Ohio's cities. This morning, we're looking into how one once quaint small town is turning into a tech-driven hub.
When change is coming and it's going from sort of a very rural area to a more dense urban, suburban setting, that's a lot of change. And so I think we've been trying to be very respectful of folks that are going through that change. And working with them to understand what the opportunities could be.
What makes New Albany so attractive to these major West Coast companies and how the city is preparing itself for thousands of people moving and commuting in. Also this morning, the rise in homelessness in Central Ohio. It's partly because of the increase in people moving here and driving up the cost of living. We speak to an organization working to combat the problem. And this morning, we're also facing the nation. I'm joined by moderator Margaret Brennan from the CBS Washington, D.C. Bureau, what she's looking at in Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan's bid to be the next House Speaker. Good morning and thank you for joining me on this Sunday, October 8th. I'm Doug Petcash. This week, we're exploring the rapid growth and the steady decline of communities across the state. We've seen the impacts new businesses are having on our part of the state. And while Columbus grows, other cities aren't so lucky. We're starting our focus this morning on New Albany. The quiet Columbus suburb isn't so quiet anymore. The city is adding thousands and thousands of jobs. Amazon is the most recent company investing in the city. They're spending nearly $4 billion on new buildings to house web servers. There's also Intel, which will be a major employer up the road. Meta and Google are expanding their own data centers as well. A vitamin brand is adding a new plant. Same for a biomanufacturing company. All of this is creating a buzz around town, mainly from all the construction happening. I recently sat down with the mayor of this growing community for a conversation about how New Albany is preparing. I started by asking him what the growth means for the city. What does all this business growth mean for New Albany?
Well, first of all, we're just super excited to have these great business partners coming into our community. That's not only going to have an impact in New Albany, but on the entire region and frankly, the state of Ohio. You know, the Intel project really brought to light the spirit of collaboration that is Columbus. The region is very well known for that. And certainly the successes we've had in New Albany are because of our ability to collaborate.
I was going to ask that, how has all of this business investment happened in recent years?
And again, I think it's all a team effort. You look at the local level, we have an incredible staff at the City of New Albany, a very professional, very well respected in the industry. And we have a track record of success, not only in bringing in those businesses, but be able to deliver on what we promised. But then you look a little bit broader. The City of Columbus is a tremendous partner with the City of New Albany. Licking County has really stepped up over the last couple of years to provide assistance. And then you look a little bit more broader than that. Jobs Ohio, a very unique, animal, so to speak, in Ohio for economic development. And of course, the state of Ohio has done a lot to help bring in these great business partners.
When you think about the roots of New Albany as a rural mill town and what it is today, has it taken years to build up that reputation as a business-friendly community to attract this type of investment?
Absolutely. And as you point out, I mean, New Albany is like a lot of other towns in Ohio, started out as a rural agricultural center. For years, it was just a stop sign between Granville and Columbus. And then, a developer came to town and had some other plans and really built, sort of from the inside out. And it was predominantly a residential area at its beginning. But as the city started to grow and wanted to diversify our revenue streams, we started to attract those business partners. And again, it was sort of that strategic planning and really putting together an atmosphere that would attract those businesses into our community. And then just really the forward-thinking investment from our city council and city staff to make that infrastructure available right from the beginning and then attract the businesses.
So you have that. That was my next question.
Absolutely.
Too, is how is the city now preparing for all this growth?
Well, we've chased a lot of really big projects over the years. You look at our success with Facebook and Meta, Amazon Web Services, Google, you mentioned Amgen, Pharmavite, other really great partners. But the Intel project, I think, really sort of, turned up the pace of development. So the city is really engaged on putting together that infrastructure, the road networks, the sewer and water, all the things they're going to need to circulate not only folks to the site, but the construction that's going to follow.
A lot of people will be moving here too, so how
Absolutely.
can the city play a role in making sure there is, first of all, enough housing and then also enough affordable housing?
Yeah, and that's certainly going to be the challenge for our entire region. And I give a lot of credit to a lot of the other leaders in Central Ohio. We've been talking about housing, workforce, transportation. We've been discussing those issues for a long period of time. And there's plans in place. But certainly with a project like Intel coming, all of that's going to be accelerated. But housing across all spectrums is going to be needed in the region. We're going to have a pretty massive influx of people over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And housing is going to have to be something that is a priority for every community. And
obviously they won't all be living right around New Albany.
Correct. I mean, we're actually a fairly small town. We're 12 to 14,000 residents, and so we're not going to be able to influx 100,000 people. It's just not going to be able to all be in New Albany. But regionally, we'll be able to come together. Each community is going to have their own opportunity as how they embrace this this new partner that's coming to town. And the growth that comes with it.
Well, speaking of embracing it, what do you tell residents who maybe have been there a long time, who like that rural atmosphere and may not like the pace of the growth?
Yeah, and I personally, I'm a bike rider. I love to get out there and ride my bike and get out in rural Ohio. It's absolutely beautiful, and I have a high degree of respect for folks that farm for a living. It's hard work, and when I close my eyes and think of the state of Ohio, that's what I picture, is the farm and agricultural communities that we have. And so when change is coming and it's going from sort of a very rural area to a more dense urban, suburban setting, that's a lot of change. And so I think we've been trying to be very respectful of folks that are going through that change and working with them to understand what the opportunities could be. And the way I've tried to describe it to folks at the end of the day, these projects are really about the future for our kids. To have those young people that get educated here in Ohio, we spend a lot of money educating our young folks, only to see them leave and go to the East Coast or the West Coast for jobs. I want them to stay here in Ohio. I want those Buckeyes that have left to come home. For me, it's all about the employment opportunity for the future.
And Intel's factory is scheduled to open sometime in 2025.
Correct.
Let's take the longer view now. What do you see for New Albany and the surrounding area after that?
So, it's 3,000 jobs that Intel has committed for that first phase of the project. Of course, with the CHIPS Act, we're hoping that there'll be a further commitment of Intel looking in the future. To your point, this is really a 30 to 50 year horizon that we're going to be looking at for this entire project to be built out at full capacity. Generally, Intel doesn't buy land that they're just going to look at. They're actually going to use it for development. But it's all the other parts of that project, I think they're going to have the larger impact on the region. The suppliers, the construction trades, the influx of talent that is going to come into the region. And it's that play that I think our other partners in the region are going to benefit from. What suppliers can they attract to their community? What employment centers can they create to take advantage of this opportunity?
So continued growth. Continued
growth. And again, it's a 30 to 50 year horizon. But I think the thing that a lot of folks have really started to embrace and acknowledge is that Ohio, we have such a great and rich history of making things with our hands, and we have great, we put the first man on the moon. We developed flight, the light bulb, all these great inventions. Ohio first in any industry, and so to be able to transfer from sort of that Rust Belt mentality of manufacturing to this new high-tech environment, I think is what the future, the future is very bright for Ohio, and I think this is going to be the project that really drives who we are 50 to 100 years from now.
New Albany is part of the reason we've seen the increases in population in the Columbus metro area. The population has been growing here for the last 2 decades. 18% of the state's population lives in Columbus or its metro area. This part of the state is really the only area that's growing in population. In the last 20 years, Ohio has had a population growth of 3%. However, when you take Columbus out of that equation, the state actually has had a net loss, some 100,000 people or 1%. Cleveland is in somewhat of a decline, but it's not alone. Once vibrant communities are suffering from poverty, crime, depopulation, and job losses. This morning, we're taking a few moments to explore the differences between places like Columbus and Cleveland. Here to speak about the decline happening in many Midwestern communities is author and Cleveland State University professor, Dr. Stephanie Ryberg-Webster. Stephanie, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Absolutely, and great to be here.
Well, first of all, I want to start with the differences between Columbus and our neighbors to the north in Cleveland. What makes these cities so different?
So I think there's a number of things. History, of course. Cleveland, boomed more than a century ago during the peak of industrialization as a city sort of centered around heavy industries. Rapid immigration growth. Of course, its positioning on Lake Erie and the Cuyahoga River kind of facilitated that in an era before automobile use was kind of the dominant mode of transportation. In the present day, there are also sort of ongoing differences between these cities. Of course, Columbus is growing and Cleveland is still in decline, although a much slower pace of decline than in the past, kind of a stabilization point, I think. One of the sort of impacts of history and how these cities developed over time is that Columbus still physically grows, like the actual geographic boundaries of the city can expand outward and capture some of the new growth that's happening in the region. Whereas Cleveland and even a city like Cincinnati cannot. They're landlocked cities completely surrounded by other incorporated communities. And so there's very little opportunity for physical growth for a city like Cleveland.
I was going to say, so is that the main factor basically in why Columbus is growing and those two aren't? I mean, you always hear that cities can build up.
Right. So yes, of course, a city like Cleveland could build up, and there is land here from, decades and decades of deindustrialization and population loss that has resulted in things like, too much housing and vacant land. So there are those opportunities, but I think these sort of economic trends become kind of catalytic. So you have a lot of recent investment in cities like Columbus in the high-tech sector and high-tech industry, and those things sort of spiral off of each other. And so Columbus kind of benefits from that at this point, whereas of course it's happening in Cleveland. It's not that there's no growth here or no investment. It's just sort of at a different pace and different scale in the 21st century right now.
What does a city like Columbus need to do to sustain growth we're experiencing?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I think, if you take kind of a long arc view of history, these things ebb and flow over time. I think to sustain growth, a region really has to be in tune with things like infrastructure development and how transportation networks sort of can accommodate those numbers of people. Things like housing affordability, because if those things start to get too high, right? If housing affordability becomes untenable for a lot of people, you can have kind of negative effects over time.
Dr. Stephanie Ryberg-Webster, thank you so much for your perspective this morning.
Absolutely.
Have a great day. Well, there's much more ahead this morning. We look into a very real problem in Columbus, the growing number of people experiencing homelessness, the people on the streets who are helping those people every day, and the concerns this Sunday for how all the expansion we've talked about may only go into making matters worse. Also ahead, moderator of Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan joins me. We'll talk about her role at CBS News and a recent major interview you've seen on the program, plus her perspective on the race for Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. Welcome back to Face the State. The future of Ohio's public school system will be in limbo in court for about 2 more weeks. This past week, a judge extended the restraining order preventing the state from moving forward with a Republican-backed overhaul of K-12 education. The restraining order stops the transition from the Ohio Department of Education to the new Department of Education and Workforce and the transfer of much of the Board of Education's power to the governor's office. However, Governor Mike DeWine says the new department does now exist because of the law the legislature passed creating it. He says he's following the court order by halting work on the transition, though, such as selecting a director for the new department. The restraining order is now in effect through October 20th. Both sides in the case have until the 16th to submit briefs to the court. Well, it's being called an alarming trend this morning. The number of people experiencing homelessness in central Ohio is growing. While Midwestern cities like Columbus have been immune to the major problems on the coasts, it's creating concern for people who work to help these members of our community. In the last year, the number of people experiencing homelessness in Franklin County rose by 22%. You see the numbers there, from 1,900 to more than 2,300. More people now are also not living in shelters, many of them young adults and families. Tuesday is World Homeless Day. Joining me this morning to talk about those rising numbers is Sam Schuler. She is the CEO of the Community Housing Network. Sam, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So maybe if you could just give us an idea of just how big is the problem of homelessness in Columbus and Franklin County?
Well, the numbers you just showed, the trend of growing by 22%, that's the first rise we've seen at that level in over 20 years. So it's a really alarming trend. It's going in the wrong direction. The number of affordable housing units in our community has been declining. Since 2017, we've lost about 38,000 affordable housing units, meaning that for every 100 people who are looking for affordable housing, only 30 houses are available. So it's just an alarming trend that we need to address to turn it around.
That's one of the contributing factors. What else is playing into it?
I think certainly the pandemic contributed to it. I think and the economics of where we are right now, the rents have gone up incredibly. I think in the last couple of years, like 56% for a 2-bedroom. So people are struggling to afford housing. So you've got a housing shortage, you have the impact of the pandemic.
And population
growth.
and
then the population growth. So all of those factors are driving this number.
Who are the people experiencing homelessness now?
Yeah. So you saw definitely more families and more young adults, and certainly the folks that we serve, people who are experiencing mental health issues. So you have a variety of folks. Sometimes it's just there's an interruption in their income and they can't afford their housing. And sometimes it's also that they've got some illnesses that are contributing to them being unable to maintain their housing.
So what is then the mission of the Community Housing Network? What is it that you do?
Well, we specifically serve the folks who are experiencing homelessness, who also have some sort of disability like a mental health or maybe an addiction or trauma-related issues. We provide what's known as permanent supportive housing. Yeah. So we combine the housing, which obviously brings stability and safety for a person, but we also have support services to make sure that the services they need to maintain that housing and recover are there and available for
With
them.
the permanent housing model, is that where you put them in a home so that they know that they have a place to stay at night, and that allows them then to focus on finding a job or, other ways that they need to take care of their families?
Right. That's exactly right. Most people who end up homeless who have a mental illness, they had that mental illness at a time they didn't have a good support system. And so they need a good support system. We all do. None of us do well if we're facing a big obstacle and don't have folks around to help us. So if you just house them, that's great. That does help them start to feel safe and foundation and focus on self-care. But then if the support system is also there, they have someone to reach out to help them with those obstacles that they're facing. That helps them make sure that they recover and that they can maintain their housing and their productive lives over time.
And people may not know that the Community Housing Network has been around for 35 years now. What does the future hold for your organization?
Well, we continue to build more housing because we need it. We have about over 1,500 units now. We've developed around 40 to 100 a year. We just opened Touchstone Field Place, a 56-unit project. We just broke ground on another one, the 44-unit project. So our hope is to keep finding resources and build more housing for the folks who need it.
And if someone wants to help, just give you a call or go to the website and sign up to volunteer? Or
Yeah, that'd be great. If they go to chninc.org, they can sign up to get our newsletter, learn more about people who are homeless, and also figure out how to contribute, donate, volunteer.
All right. Sam Schuler with the Community Housing Network, thank you so much for being here and giving us an idea of just what the issue is with homelessness here.
Great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, a conversation with CBS's Face the Nation moderator, Margaret Brennan, is coming up next. Each Sunday, I'm honored to moderate this show directly after Face the Nation and Margaret Brennan. Face the Nation is one of the longest running news programs on TV. I spoke with moderator of Face the Nation and CBS News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Margaret Brennan recently. And off the top, I asked her about Congressman Jim Jordan and his push to be the next House Speaker.
Well, it's really a race for 218 votes to get that actual confirmation that Republicans want one of these two men who've put themselves forward so far. There are rumors of other candidates also eyeing a jump into this race, but Ohio's Jim Jordan is describing himself publicly as the person who can best unite the party. And he's using that term unite because there is, frankly, a civil war within the Republican Party right now. We saw that just within the past few days with the ouster of Kevin McCarthy, orchestrated by a group of right-wing Republicans who turned to Democrats for those 218 votes to oust the speaker from power. So Jordan's describing himself as the man to unite, but that's an interesting choice because it once again seems to refer back to McCarthy's strategy, which was about trying to reach out to those hardliners rather than trying to neutralize the challenge they pose to the moderates who make up the majority of the Republican Party. Now, Steve Scalise, as you mentioned, one of the top Republican operators under McCarthy, is also running for the job, and we will see how persuasive he is to some of those hardliners. But again, that seems to be a similar strategy. Rather than neutralize, as Speaker Pelosi did when she was challenged by some of the progressives on the left of her party, these Republican candidates are reaching out to the more fringe elements.
You had a conversation with former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy just this last Sunday. That proved to be very consequential. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, Speaker McCarthy came on Face the Nation last Sunday with a victory lap. He was actually viewing himself as having pulled a rabbit out of a hat, and he did. At the 11th hour, put together a continuing resolution, a short-term deal to avoid a government shutdown. He persuaded the majority of Republicans to vote for it, and he got Democratic votes to keep the government open. What he didn't get was a bill that brought along some of the more conservative members. In fact, 90 Republicans voted against it. And it was a choice rhetorically for Speaker McCarthy to once again try to reach out to those harder line members. He could have said he brokered a bipartisan deal. He could have said that it was the moderates who were in the leading position there and bringing along Democrats. Instead, he chose to attack Democrats, who, by the way, provided the necessary votes to keep the government open. And so he made a choice rhetorically, and it was one that did appear to backfire on him, because right before that vote was held on the motion to vacate, the attempt to oust the speaker, Democrats played that interview, and many of them walked away from their caucus meeting emboldened with this idea that McCarthy wasn't reaching out to them, but once again was trying to make them the enemy rather than recognize the civil war within the party.
Once again, that was Margaret Brennan from Face the Nation. And thank you for joining me this week for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. I'll see you next Sunday at 11:30. Have a great rest of your day.